What we'd like to do now is to bring in Major General Chip Chapman on this. Chip, just wonder from your point of view, strategically, what you're seeing, what you're making of the latest, as here we are on day 20.
Well, I think two things are evident. Firstly, in war, things regress to a mean. And at the moment, we're seeing entropy, which means no significant moves. And we could get to the point in 1 or 2 weeks' time where the Russians culminate. That is, they have run out of either logistic support or combat power to go and do any more offensives. They've got too many lines of operation, trying to have too many objectives, and you can't support all of those. The thrust from Sumy towards the east of Kyiv seems to be petering out. So that's not looking good for them. The second thing which plays into this is that climate and terrain can have a severe impact on the tempo and effects of combat. And we're seeing this. It's D+19 in terms of the war, but those soldiers were across the border, either in Belarus or Russia, for a significant length of time. And disease and non-battle injury actually generally take more people out in war than those who are killed or wounded. So you've probably got a fragile morale, a poorly supported in logistic terms army, which may well be at the point of culminating. And a culminating army is one that has problems moving again and can be one that surrenders en masse in the future.
Gosh. Interesting that you see it like that, because we think, we're dealing with one of the world's superpowers, one of the world's few superpowers, and you would have just thought they would have had every resource at their fingertips.
Well, that's just not true. I do remember 4 years ago when the Skripal case happened, doing a number of interviews when I said then that Russia is not a superpower, it's a super problem. And we're seeing here at the moment a terrible army performing terribly, and terrible armies don't perform better in the subsequent weeks. So we're seeing the weaknesses of the system where the kleptocrats, those who consume the money, take the money, are in the fore. So the money which should have been invested in a modernized Russian army or armed forces doesn't seem to be there. It's been siphoned off, and we're seeing the consequences of that now, thankfully.
I want to ask you about war crimes. Obviously, we saw yesterday Dominic Raab travelling to The Hague to assist in the prosecution. What are you hearing about what's been happening on the ground? Lots of reports about things like white phosphorus bombs being used, dumb bombs, which are obviously indiscriminate, thermobaric bombs as well. All absolutely brutal.
It's not the bombs which are the war crimes, it's the targeting. Now, 4 things should occur for it to be legal. Firstly, it needs to be proportionate. Secondly, there should be distinction between civilian and military targets. It should be necessary. And fourthly, it should be legitimate. So if it doesn't meet those criteria, it should not take place. Now, there are also certain categories of people in war who should be treated as non-combatants: the sick, the very old, the very young, the infirm, clergy. And we've seen those horrific shots down in Mariupol of the pregnant woman who died. That is definitely a war crime. Now, unless Russia lose this war and there is a change in the political polity in Russia, I don't think you'll ever be able to hold someone to account. And we've seen this really again on the Skripal case, where we have a murder warrant out for 2 citizens who are being protected by the Russian state.
Yeah, and that builds up the picture that Isabel was talking about, just this weakness that Boris Johnson's writing about today. But, he can talk now. He wasn't about then. One wonders what he would have done over Crimea at the time. But we are getting reports, senior UK defence sources today, indicating that Russia may only be able to sustain what they've got, the pressure that they're putting on Ukraine now, full fighting capacity for another 10 to 14 days. And judging by what you're saying today, that doesn't seem impossible. That seems quite likely.
No, that's getting towards this culminating point. Now, of course, a culminating point can also be achieved for the Ukrainians, but I don't think that's there. It's when the defence can no longer have any offensive power to go at. It seems to me that the Ukrainians are being very successful at interdicting the Russian lines of communication, their logistic tails, because the Russians don't control anything apart from pieces of grey tarmac and a small area to the side of that. So the gaps and surfaces that exist between that are places that you can infiltrate through and attack the Russians. And the Ukrainians seem to be doing that very well. Now, I don't like looking in the rearview mirror back to 2014 for what happened in the invasion and annexation of Ukraine. But one thing you can say, that this, for the Ukrainian perspective, is not D+19. This is the 8th year, and they've had 8 years to think and prepare and how they will fight this war. And they're fighting it very effectively. And as I've said many times, it's not armies that fight wars, it's nations that fight wars. And this is a nation energized by the leadership of Zelensky, where there is a common purpose to defeat the Russians. As long as that is in train, then the Ukrainians have a significant chance of strategic success here.
Hey, Chip, really interesting hearing what you've got an update.
I just wanted to ask you about a little breaking line that's coming through. Overnight, we heard that US intelligence was suggesting that Russia had asked Chinese for military support. Well, this morning, the Chinese embassy in London has come out saying that that claim is malicious disinformation and that the most important thing is not to add fuel to the fire. What's your take on all of this? Because China, looked before the Beijing Olympics to be cozying up with Russia in all of this. But
there's a crack in the ranks now.
Yeah.
I think there's two parts to that. If you look at the messaging which came out of the Beijing meeting, what was significant, I think, was that Ukraine wasn't mentioned at all. So there was some distance put between Beijing and Moscow on that. Now, American intelligence so far, prior to this, the invasion here, has been absolutely top-notch. Everything they've said has been correct. So it could be that the Chinese will provide some equipment. But again, integrating that into a fighting force takes time. If it's just something like small arms ammunition of the same caliber used by the AK series of small arms weapons, that's easy. That's just logistics to get it there. But you can't take equipment which soldiers are not used to, not crewed, and you need the more manpower. Now, we know that 100% of the combat capability, which was either in Belarus or on the border in Russia, is now in Ukraine and is somewhere being degraded to below 90%. If they go below 75%, they will become combat non-effective.
Okay, Chip, look, always fascinating to talk to you. So much more to talk to you about, and obviously we'll in the days and weeks ahead. Thanks very much indeed. We've got to leave it there.